everything that we release and we ship has to be fully accessible. There's no compromise on that. We launched the ambassador program because we knew we had to keep scaling the design system. And the ambassador program was one of the best mechanisms we had to scale that. People are used to doing things in a certain way. And you come in and you ask them, okay, now you need to change it. Now you need to slow down. Now you need to learn a new thing. Selling the design system internally is a never-ending job.
Hello, Guy. Welcome to the Design Systems podcast. I would like to start with describing what you do at your company and also a little bit of about your company, Thomson Reuters, if somebody accidentally don't know about it, which I thought.
Yeah. Hey, Romina, it's awesome to be here. So I'll actually start with explaining a bit about Thomson Reuters because I think the context is really important for what I do. Thomson Reuters is a global company. I think most people are familiar with the Reuters news aspect of Thomson Reuters, but that's I would say a part of the business. There's a big chunk of what Thomson Reuters does that is about creating applications for tax and accounting and also legal professionals. So a lot of lawyers and legal firms use those products and tax and accounting firms use the other side of the products. So very specialized kind of software. And what I do specifically is I lead two areas within Thomson Reuters. I lead all the public facing websites. So anything that's not within an application, but more importantly for our chat today, I lead the Thomson Reuters design system called Saffron.
Cool name. Where did the name come from?
That is a long story, but Thomson Reuters used to have one of the main brand colors was more of a orangey yellow, and we were just looking for names that were both aspirational but also somehow were related to that color. And saffron was just something that we all sort of really enjoyed and liked, and it made a lot of sense for what we're doing.
Oh, nice. So I guess that was a while ago, many years.
That was about, so we started to work on Saffron 3.5 years ago.
Okay. But I would assume that Thomson Reuters has been going through significant digital transformation, and it would be lovely to hear more about how you structure the process. So around design, engineering, and also then 3 years ago, design system in the middle. How did you
So
all these challenges?
absolutely. So I only joined 3.5 years ago specifically to start and build a team that would build Saffron. Prior to that, Thomson Reuters, I think years before that, was more of an acquisition company. They would purchase products and let those products run. And then, I don't know exactly when, but years ago, they decided to go from a holding company to an operating company and basically start operating those products themselves. And eventually that led to consolidating or unifying the different design teams into one design organization, which I'm part of course. And another aspect of that was, okay, we have these kind of pockets or localized design systems that are for these types of products or in this area. Let's create one design system to encompass the wide range of products that we have. And that's when I joined Thomson Reuters, and that's when I started. I built the team. There were a few people who were already at Thomson Reuters and have worked on some of those earlier or previous design systems. But our mandate was to set up this team. And we went through like the entire design organization. That was back in 2022, back in the good old days when companies were hiring people. We have a massive growth, and we went from 6 people, that was the size of the team when I joined, to over 20 people at the end of that year. But the really exciting thing, and something that I would say Thomson Reuters really spoiled me in that sense, is the fact that we have a truly cross-functional team. We have designers, we have UX engineers, we have software engineers, we have a researcher, we have accessibility specialists, content designers, product manager, program manager. We have all this very varied and diverse group of people that are all working as one team. And that has really made a big difference for us.
Do you think the biggest advantage was that you already had trust from the leadership team when you joined to actually build a team and have the support for design system and changing all the processes?
I would say absolutely yes, because I don't think starting on this project would have been possible if we didn't have the buy-in and more importantly, the funding for this kind of project and kind of team. That really spans both like we exist both in the design org, but also within engineering, because that's the engineering side of the design system team that we have. And without that buy-in, it would have taken us a lot longer than, last 3 years to be where we are now.
But how did they work before you joined? Did most of the work was done by engineers or they still had separate design teams?
So they had separate design teams and those, so for example, there was a design system that was specifically for tax products and people who worked on, there were people who, it was more of a, I would say a passion project in some cases. Yes, there was a bit of funding, but it wasn't something that is defined as the Saffron design system team is now. And you would have designers who were really passionate about it and content designers who allocated their time to it and maybe a couple of engineers, but it wasn't something that the company really, stood behind and said, okay, we are committing to it.
You stated in one of the interviews that design is actually 90% of communication, which I agree. But how did you then learn designers to accept this, to learn to how to communicate and also update all the processes, come together and build something that will help the whole organization?
Yeah, this is the tough part, right? I mean, this is how do you get people to change what they're doing, but also it's not only change management, but also how do you get people to be on board with something that someone else is doing? And I wouldn't say everything we did was perfect. We definitely had fumbles, but that's how you learn. And we learned very quickly that we had to involve the rest of the design organization, the design teams, as much as we could. Not in a sense of we're going to build exactly what they want, but we're going to build exactly what they need. And the biggest change for us came actually a year after we launched, or not a year after we started to work and we actually launched version 1 of the design system. We set in motion a program. It's not really unique to us, but it worked really well. And that's what we call the design system ambassador, where we have a representative from each of the design teams and they're the ones who, it's kind of like a two-directional communication. They bring to us the requirements and needs of their specific products because we wouldn't be able to know that. They're the ones who are working on their products. They're, the front of the line talking to their customers. We would never be able to have that kind of information to inform our decisions. So we need that. That's the first thing. And on the other side, they're the ones who bring the updates and sort of ways of working from the design system team back to their own product design teams. And that has been, I would say, one of the biggest advantages for the way we work and how it helps us keep informed, but also make sure that the design teams know that we're working on things that they actually need.
Did you already start with having design ambassadors from the start, or I don't know, after 6 months when you had something to report?
Yeah. So when we just started, we didn't have that. We were kind of like, I would say the first 6 months, we were working in the dark, which is never a good thing. But we were really trying to move forward as quickly as we could. We had some input, or we did go and seek out input from the design teams. And we asked a few key products. What would be, like, if we started from scratch, what would be, give us a list of the components you would need for your designs and please order them by priority. So we got a few of those lists and we put them all together. And that gave us essentially a roadmap of what components we should be working on first, because that means that we know that those are the components that will be used by the most teams. That's kind of hopefully something that made sense also to those design teams. But once we launched, which was a year after we started to work, we launched version 1 with a fairly decent Figma library and a much smaller code library. That's when we launched the ambassador program, because we knew we had to keep scaling the design system, and the way we worked until then would just did not make sense. We had to start getting a lot more. We had to scale faster. And the ambassador program was one of the best mechanisms we had to scale that.
But was your idea in the start, since you cover news, media, tax, corporate solutions, financial and risk solutions, was your idea that you have some components that will exist in all of the products? So this was your base design system, if we can say it like that.
It was. The news media side of things is handled by a separate design team and function within Thomson Reuters. So that's not something we had to directly influence or impact. But everything else, all the other web applications, it's something that we intentionally said we're going to have one design system to cover that. And of course, there's always going to be product specific or segment specific deviations or customizations. But we were very much, that's why we targeted components that would be cross segment as much as possible.
And how do you prioritize components and getting them into design system now? Is there like a decision-making process, or how can people report what they need?
Yeah. So we have a pretty good support system in place, which is both for suggesting new things, requesting enhancements, reporting bugs, asking questions. How does this work? How do we do this? And we decided that in order to scale fast, not just what we're building and adding to the design system, but also how we scale our support, we have half of the team is essentially dedicated to supporting our consumers. And right now, the design system itself, it's been 3.5 years. It is pretty exhaustive in terms of what it contains. There are not a lot of specific, definitely not components, maybe, molecules or organisms that some teams are requesting. And as long as it's required we stick with the sort of rule of thumb of 3 or more products would be using it, then it makes sense to become a standard within the design system. So that has been our approach. Again, approach that we've seen other teams out there adopt and worked well for them and has worked well for us as well.
Is it mandatory to use design system, or how do you ensure that the adoption is high? I know that you're not a policeman, but still, how do you encourage people to use it?
Yeah, it is. That's a great question. How do you get people to use your design system? I would say that because the initiative to create this one design system to cover the products at Thomson Reuters came from the head of design. There's this very strong mandate within the design org for designers to use a design system. But there's one thing to say we all have to use a design system, and that doesn't always translate to everyone using it for a lot of different reasons. We've seen teams that say, I would love to use a design system, but my engineering counterparts are not there yet. They are not able to use your design system for, again, whatever reason it is. And some of those reasons are very valid. So they cannot do that. And then we work with those teams. We say, you know what? That's fine. If you cannot use the components, for example, use our tokens, style with the tokens. And we have seen teams do it very successfully. We're always trying to find creative solutions to how to use as much of the design system as possible. So I would say it's a lot easier within the design organization to have people use the design system, because we didn't just release the design system and say, okay, we're done. Enjoy. We're also constantly testing how well it's working for them. And we know that we did our initial survey of our designers in 2023. And we established a baseline of their satisfaction and how easy it is for them to use the design system. And then based on that informed a lot of our activities in 2024. How do we improve that? How do we make it easier to use? How do we improve our documentation, our training material, the way it's built, the way it's designed? And we measured it again, and we saw a huge increase in their satisfaction and ease of use. So that also is something that, again, we can point to and say, look, you told us yourselves, It's now much easier. It helps you move faster. We did the same thing with engineers, product engineers who are using the design system to establish the baseline. And again, I would say, every year we have sort of a theme for what our design system team internally wants to achieve. So the first year was, we just need to build something. We need to release something. The second year was, okay, now we need to build our libraries. We release something. Now we need to grow it and make sure we have a critical mass of components that people can use. And then the third year was, now we need to stabilize it. We built a lot of things. Let's make sure that we reduce the number of bugs, that we increase our accessibility, compliance, that we make sure that the system is stable. And the theme for us for this year is, now that we have a robust design system and it's stable, let's ensure that the barrier for entry and the challenges of adopting it are as low as possible.
And how do you ensure that you have special trainings for anyone that joins not just your design system team, but especially Thomson Reuters, either in engineering part or design part?
Yeah, we put a lot of emphasis on our documentation and our training material. We have 2 dedicated content designers, and some of the work that they're doing is ensuring that everything we put out there that's written, especially that's written, or training videos, tutorials, any sort of communication material, is right for the task. We have a lot of initiatives that we're trying out. There's a lot of experimentation in how we do that. So we started this, we had our plans last year to go out with a curriculum of studies. And we said, we're going to make sure that everyone learns not only how to use Figma properly, but also how to work with the design system well, and how to build things that align with how we build things for the design system, so it makes it easier to contribute it later to the design system if they want to. That was a big undertaking. And we actually decided, as we were going through it, that, you know what, that's a lot of work. We're not sure we're going to sort of, the return on investment would be that high. Instead, let's do something a bit more nimble, a bit quicker. And we launched a different initiative that essentially serves the same outcome, which was important for us. The outcome was, people know how to use the design system well. And instead we said, you know what, every time someone asks us a question, we're going to have someone hop on a video call with that person, record it, show them how to use it, and then we release that as a tutorial video. So we're always, I joke that every time someone comes and asks me how to do something and we talk through it, my last question is always, okay, how do we scale this? How do we take what we just did and make sure we can scale it for the rest of the design organization, the Thomson Reuters in general sometimes?
Yeah, that's a cool solution because you don't have so much work in the start and you might even offer materials that will not be so useful. Do you also have weekly office hours or anything that they join and actually see what you did for the past week or month?
Absolutely. So we have several of those. We have weekly office hours. We have office hours for engineers. We have office hours for accessibility. We have office hours for content designers. We all work in 2-week sprints. So at the end of every sprint, we have a demo of what we did in that sprint. Yeah, there's a lot of it. And there's also the weekly or biweekly design system ambassador meeting. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to come in person and ask questions or show things that they're working on and really learn from each other.
So, how many design system ambassadors do you have right now?
One from each team.
Okay, so it's also engineering teams that contribute and are part of this.
So we started, the first initiative was design ambassadors. So those are people within the design organization. We are looking into doing a similar thing within the product engineering organization, where we have engineering advocates for the design systems. Because again, a design system is only as strong as it serves designers, but also engineers, right? It's a design system that only shows up with designs and doesn't end up in the actual finished product is not as helpful.
Yeah, so how do you structure sprints? How do you actually pick up and how do you choose this initiative? And also, do you then divide the work in your design system team, or does it happen that you invite people from other teams?
That's a very big question. It all starts with the annual planning. So everything starts from our annual roadmap. And this is really where I need to give huge props to our product manager for the design system. We always have ideas of what we want to accomplish next year, which is based on things that we're already doing and we need to continue working on, new initiatives, things that we hear around us from either leadership or we know that things are going to be really important that we need to sort of prepare ourselves for. And all those things, we put them in one big bucket and say, these are the possible things that we could be working on. And then what we did was, again, really important, something that we learned early on and I talked about earlier was how do we get feedback from the rest of from our consumers to know that we, first of all, know that we're working on the things that would be the most impactful because there's never a shortage of things to do. But the design system is always, the capacity is always smaller than that. So you need to make sure that whatever you're working on is the important thing to work on. So we went out and talked to representatives from design, from UX engineering, from product engineering, and just got their feedback on here is a list of 30 things, for example, that we're thinking of doing next year. What do you think we must do? What are things we should do, could do, or maybe there's some things you think we should not focus on at all? And we got all that, we synthesized that feedback, and we created a roadmap for the year. And the roadmap is we try to sort of allocate it to quarters. And of course, we have a lot more confidence in the quarter one, quarter two, because it's closer, less confidence in things that are further away, because there's always going to be emergencies and things that pop up and take precedent. But that allowed us to have at least a blueprint for what we're going to work on that year. And within each of those epics, it's broken down to two stories, and that helps us really allocate the work for a specific sprint.
Do you also allocate then specific part for people getting to you and needing more help in some specific areas that you might not had in mind 6 months ago?
We try to be as flexible as possible. And that's why we have it all starts from those themes or from those epics that we have in the roadmap. We know that working on accessibility and ensuring the design system is as responsive as possible, for example, is really important. Anything new that comes up and say, hey, we have to work on this thing, we need to assess it compared with everything else that happens. And if it is, sometimes things come up from leadership that say, this has to be done by this date. And then we say, okay, that also means that other things will be pushed out. There's a constant amount of work that can be done in a certain time. It's always a matter of, okay, what compromise are we making? What if something comes in, what comes out?
And also, yeah, based on resources and how many people you have. So you mentioned that you scaled to 20 people. Is this still the number that you have?
It's a bit more because there's the design system engineering team grew up a bit more. We have, but it stayed around that number, 20 to 30 people.
Can you walk me through how you actually chose what kind of profiles will you hire? So you started with one person, and who was that one person that joined the first? What was your style for hiring or still is?
I was very lucky in that sense because when I joined, there was also I joined with the knowledge that there's a certain budget for this team, which means there's a certain number of people that can be hired. When I joined, there were 3 designers, 1 content designer, and 2 UX engineers already there, people who have been at the company for years. And from that sort of nucleus, we grew the team around them. And we talked about, okay, do we need 1 more person within this function or do we need 2 more here? But We try to do it as balanced as possible. So we have, I would say, our design team within the or design group within that, and our UX engineering and our product engineering or software engineering groups within the design system team. They're all very balanced. And plus, we have those other people from functional teams like accessibility and content design and research.
So those people that were there before, they all start working in design system.
They have been working on previous design systems. So those sort of more localized design systems, they've always been part of it. I think that was the main reason why they were picked or maybe even chose to be on the design system team. Absolutely.
Okay, because sometimes, people are creative and they don't want to do system work. And it might be even harder for those to adapt to the new processes.
I know. I would say I am extremely lucky with the design system team that I have. Everyone on the design system team is there because they want to be, because they chose to be, because they see it as sort of a, what is the word I'm looking for? A mission, even to work on the design system. They're highly passionate about accessibility, for example. Our, we are very committed to accessibility at Thomson Reuters, and especially on the design system team. Everything that we release and we ship has to be fully accessible. There's no compromise on that. And that is something that I know everyone on the design system team is very passionate about.
How did you start with this initiative, or was it always like we need to have accessible components and that's it? There is, we will not
It
discuss.
was it was never a question. It was a question at all. There's a very big and quite incredible accessibility team within the design organization. And they work mostly, of course, with the product design teams, but we're also very lucky to have a couple of them work on the design system team. And it is something that we are, again, never even crossed our mind to not do that.
Do you have some processes or tips for anyone that might not do accessible components at the moment? How can they ensure that part of their process and handoff is also having accessible components?
It's a lot easier when you have people who are dedicated to that. And part of everything, part of our sprint, right, is ensuring that an accessibility specialist has reviewed what we're doing, not just at the end of the process, but also as we're designing and building it to ensure that it is all built with accessibility in mind. If you don't have someone who is, I know a lot of other companies, they don't have dedicated accessibility specialists. And usually it's actually the design system people themselves who are the most passionate about accessibility, and they're the ones who are working to make the company itself more accessible by ensuring that the design system components are accessible. There's so much you need to do and keep in mind and be aware of. I would say a big thing for us is essentially just having a checklist and mapping out how how each component fits within that checklist. So you can have a component that checks all boxes and you say, you know what, that meets everything we need to in terms of accessibility. And you can have something else that's either, is only partially meeting those or sometimes not at all. And then you need to prioritize those elements. Like, there are things that are easier, color contrast, usually easier to fix than how something behaves with assistive technology. Nothing is really complicated, but you need to, first of all, know what's not working, how to fix it, and then just prioritize it.
Yeah, a lot of people just hire accessibility experts when they start with design systems. So they say, yeah, we will feed you for 3 months and that's it. They will solve the problem, but it's not like that. So are there any specific tips, that you would like to share how you write and documentation? You mentioned already before that you are quite big on helping designers and developers understand everything. But what's your process? So, for example, you have a sprint, you make the component, and then you also code it. And what happens afterwards?
There's always going to be documentation, stories. attached to that. And there's also other documentation stories. One of the things that we're focusing on this year is actually improving our documentation. It's one of those things that I think every team that's building a product, they know that product better than anyone else, whether it's a design system or whether you're a regular product design or product team that's working on a product. No one else knows it better than you. So you make a lot of assumptions of what people know, how people understand it. And those assumptions are not always correct. And this is where research comes into play. This is where we go and we talk to people and say, and try to figure out, do you understand this documentation? Is this documentation helpful for you? We look at what are the questions that people are asking in our support, on teams and our support channels. So if we see, the same question come up, that's a great opportunity to improve that kind of information, right? We're looking at PRs, code that's being checked in. We're looking at what are the common comments or feedback that our team gives people who submit code or contribute code to the design system. And again, we want to identify what are the common issues that people who use the design system run into. Again, perfect opportunity to go and address and look at, okay, is it our documentation? Is it our training material? All those things we try to make them as clear as possible, but also ensure that it has what people need at the time that they need it.
You mentioned research. Does that also mean that you get the feedback from product design teams? So what I mean is that, for example, you create a component, you launch it and make it public, and then, for example, people don't know how to use it. Do you also have some kind of testing before this goes into wild? Or then later on that you get feedback if something's not useful or it doesn't provide the conversion rate that you expected, or you get many support tickets for not understanding what's the process there from actual users? How do you have this feedback loop, that also gives you more work or updates?
Of course, that's a great question because it's very tricky to do. Because let's say, how do you test a button, for example, out of context, right? If you have a
You
page
can't.
that people don't know how to use, right? Um, it's usually not the button itself, unless the button isn't working, right? And you click on it and nothing happens. It's usually not the specific component in isolation. There's a whole context of the page. What is the text on it? Where are things located? Every UX researcher who conducts usability tests on the product themselves, for example, there's always fields where they can put in feedback or things that they learned that potentially have something to do with the design system components. Of course, it gets much easier when it's not atomic components, but when you have something that is maybe form behavior, or you have patterns that incorporate several components together and are not working. So those are easier to sort of test because there's a lot more context to them by themselves. But we always investigate we get those logs of, here are potential things that could be related to the design system itself. We go over them as a team and we identify, is there anything that we can do or need to do in order to make it better? And again, documentation can be part of it because maybe the component is wonderful on its own, but if people put two components together in a way that they should not, and we didn't make it clear through our documentation, that is definitely something we can address.
Yeah, a lot of times we think, okay, we made a perfect component and that's it. We will return back in 1 year. So what would you say that was the biggest challenge in these past 3 years that you're managing and creating design system?
It's always people. And not because there's anything wrong, but you're trying to get people to change the way they're working. People work in a certain way. And it's the same with any sort of product that you put out there. People are used to doing things in a certain way. And you come in and you ask them, okay, now you need to change it. Now you need to slow down. Now you need to learn a new thing. Now you need to try to fumble with it and figure out how it works. I can see why there's always going to be a certain reaction to that. How do you How do you minimize that? And that has been a really big focus of mine. When we launched the design system, the year after that, I went and did sort of roadshow meetings with almost every product, their product leadership and engineering, to talk about the design system, to explain what it is, what it's supposed to give them, what they can use, how it's growing. And this is sort of selling the design system internally is a never ending job. That always happens, but that is part of it, right? I mean, you want people to be excited about the design system, and you want to keep looking for success stories, whether they're small, whether they're big, and make sure you always tell those success stories publicly and as loud as possible, because those are the things that are going to help other people decide to use their design system. Is very rarely the data of, oh, we save people X number of hours. But unless people hear, there was this one person who used the design system tokens in 2 days to style their entire product, and they did it only by using our documentation. That is an incredible story that shows that, first of all, you can use our tokens, and it's not that difficult. It's quite easy.
Do you also measure design system, or you only focus on these success stories that people share and you log them?
We do everything. We measure adoption in code. So we scan front-end files and identify how many front-end components in those files are from Saffron. So we want to have a combination of quantitative data, which is adoption in code, adoption within Figma, satisfaction, those surveys that I talked about, but also qualitative. And that combination of, we have the numbers, but we also have the human stories, so to speak, of people using it and people finding value in it, and it's helping them. You need to have that full story.
So now we can say a few words about design tokens because that's a huge topic, and always I feel it's the scariest one for everyone that didn't heard about design tokens and implementing them. What would you say was the crucial thing that you decided to use them? And probably you have some custom plugins or custom made solutions to connect with the code. But still, yeah, what was the process like from choosing names and then also implementing them?
I would probably not be able to talk too much about that because I was not heavily involved in that. We have incredible designers who worked on the structure and keep refining it all the time because there's more information, there's new information coming out, there's new needs, there's additional requirements. That's something that keeps evolving. We're about to launch or update our tokens for a new brand. Thomson Reuters launched a new brand last year, and we are updating the design system with that new brand expression. So we've been working a lot on updating the tokens in the past few months. One of the challenges we have at Thomson Reuters is because so many different products were built by different companies originally, different teams, different tech stacks. We have a wide range of tech stacks. We have a lot of different flavors of React. We have different flavors of Angular. We have other different frameworks in the mix. Not all of them are able to use our components right away. And this is where tokens have been an extremely powerful tool for us.
Yeah, probably it's hard to scale a design system without design tokens, so that's a fact. What would you say that most people get wrong about design systems?
I think one of the missteps I've seen is overselling the design system. Design systems are wonderful, don't get me wrong. And to me, it's a no-brainer to use a design system. Like it's very basic engineering principles, right? Like reuse. Why do you need to invent a new thing every time you're building something? There are things that if you have solved this problem, turn it into a standard for your company. But I've seen articles that talk about the ROI of design systems, and they mention numbers, 30, 40, sometimes 50% increase in, acceleration and speed, for example, that I just have, and that people take those numbers and then present it to their leadership as the reason to invest in a design system. And I think that's a very dangerous path to go down because every design system is highly specific for its organization and for the product and for the structure of the organization. And if you promise leadership, 30% acceleration because of a design system, and it ends up being only in quotes 10%, which is again huge, you're setting wrong expectations. I think that is something that we need to be a lot more honest with ourselves and with the people we want to invest in our design system.
Yeah, this part I feel it's connected with the education as well. So if you educate your leadership why design systems and how this process looks like, I think it's much easier and they understand it in a much better way than just, you will save X amount, you will save X amount of time, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, was there ever a time that you faced resistance so that someone said, no, I'm not going to use design system? You mentioned before that some people have valid reasons, but was there a time that some people just didn't want to adapt to this new process? And how did you solve it?
I would say there's always going to be some resistance in specific cases. A lot of times it's because of time constraints. Like a product team is supposed to deliver something by a certain date. And starting the first time you work with a design system is always going to slow you down. You're changing the way you're used to working and you're learning a new system. That's always going to take longer than just continuing to do what you're doing already. So there's always going to be a bit of resistance. Okay, why do you want me to do this? It's going to make me move slower. It's not going to let me ship on time. And this is where we really try to work with those teams as closely as possible and provide creative solutions or build a proof of concept with them to show that it may not be as difficult or time consuming as they think. And of course, where we are now is very different from where we were 2.5 years ago when version 1 of the design system launched. We know a lot more. We have a lot more included in the design system itself. And we're much better set up for success. And we're also trying to find other ways for them to benefit from it. So for example, we have products that maybe did not take into consideration a lot of accessibility when they were built. Or this is where we can say, you know what, yes, using the design system is going to be, take you a bit longer. You may need to add a few sprints to your work, but it's going to also eliminate those issues, those accessibility bugs that you have here. So we're trying to find those trade-offs and really make sure that the design system is not perceived only as something that's going to slow them down.
Or make them speedy, 50%.
Exactly.
But how do you see design systems evolving over the next 3 to 5 years, particularly because of the AI and other technologies?
That's a good question. I think there is definitely a lot of benefit in having design system plug into or play a part in the processes that designers are exploring. So if designers are exploring ways to even just ideate quicker or come up with a working prototype quicker that they can go and test and first of all, identify if this is really the solution they want to use, I think design systems can play a really great role there. Because again, if there's a way for you to add your design system into the engine that creates those quick, probably not final designs, but something that gets you there quicker, I think that's going to have a lot of value. We're also exploring areas where we can provide our consumers, designers and engineers, information about the design system and how to use it and how not to use it through some AI tools that can be where they are. So if you're coding something, we're exploring ways to provide you that information and guidance within the tool you're using. instead of you having to go somewhere else and find that documentation.
Is there something you wish you knew when you started with design system or just design in particular? Because I know that your background is actually being an engineer, right? And then you moved to design. So is there sense that you would like to share with listeners, how can they accelerate their career and also
Mhm.
maybe when they start with design systems? Yeah.
I think coming from a background of software development has been very beneficial, not in the terms of should designers code. I don't want to open that can of worms.
Oh no.
But I think it really shows, like, I have the two sides. I have the software development, I have the UX design side of things. It kind of like reflects into design systems. A good design system, a strong design system team balances design and engineering. It's really, if you don't have that balance, you build something that is only serves a certain audience and doesn't have that holistic perspective. I've seen engineers learn a lot about design and about design system and build a better design system by collaborating with a designer. And I've seen designers learn a lot by collaborating from engineers and seeing how they think about building those components and how they think about them being used. Both sides learn a lot from each other and really enrich and improve the way they work. And the design system itself and the design system consumers are the main beneficiaries of that.
And we come to the communication part again.
It's all about talking to other people.
Is there any book or resource or blog, podcast that you would recommend to anyone that wants to learn more about design systems? Or just design in particular, or maybe communication?
I would say a book that is really a book about communication that I think is incredible. It's not necessarily about communication with another person, although there are wonderful books about that. There's one that's waiting for me and I haven't opened it yet though. But a book that has really helped me more from a mentoring and coaching and leadership perspective is called The Coaching Habit. It's a pretty short book, but it provides an incredible framework of how, when someone comes to you with a problem or a question, we're all, or most of us, are very natural problem solvers, and we tend to give them an answer or okay, this is what I would do. This book, The Coaching Habit, is really good in giving you a framework of questions to ask. Instead of providing advice, asking questions and arriving at something together that is also going to help that person have the confidence to solve that problem in the future. So I think that book has really helped me become a better coach, a better mentor.
Yeah, that we all learn to listen, not just advise or maybe even decide instead of somebody else. So, what's your favorite thing to do when you're not in front of the computer and thinking about design systems?
Well, I actually have a podcast that I work on. Actually, I'm celebrating today when we're recording. I'm celebrating a year of that podcast. It's called Design Downtime.
But you already had 2 seasons, right?
Yes, and I'm launching season 3 soon. And the idea came when I was getting a bit frustrated with conversations on websites like LinkedIn, where they were focusing only on this is how you become a 10x designer and this is how you become more efficient. And very rarely I would see a post that was about something that someone likes to do or enjoy outside of work. And I said, you know what? I'd love to pursue that. So the podcast is, every episode is a conversation with a design professional about something they like to do or enjoy or passionate about that has nothing to do with design, have nothing to do with work. And people talk about their love of coffee or dancing or travel or live streaming. It's fascinating because, again, it allows me to do one of the things I enjoy the most, which is talking to other people about something they enjoy doing. And I'm a very curious person, and I love listening to people talk about those things and really or helping them share that passion and love with everyone else.
Yeah, it's also a great way to connect with somebody that you might just see on LinkedIn and you have some specific understanding of who they are. But then you listen to your podcast and you're like, oh, wow, this is really cool.
It is such a great tool to sort of get rid of those misconceptions you might have about people because you only see that their professional persona, so to speak.
Everything's tied up on LinkedIn. I mean, in
Mhm.
one way, you also think that you might get too personal, and it's a thin line, I feel. But yeah, I totally encourage you to do more seasons because it's a great way to meet people. And also for me, I was always surprised when I listened to your episodes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's clearly that you are a great listener. That's why you're also a great leader. But yeah, now you have to answer what you like to do when you're not recording podcasts and about design system.
It's now, spring is finally here. So really enjoy hiking, walking, spending time out. We have a dog, so definitely do a lot of that thing. Indoors, it's a whole mix of hobbies, whether it's playing the guitar, playing board games. I'm a big board game nerd. Watching movies, playing video games with my kids. Yeah, I'd say those are the main things.
Nice. Which board game is the best one for you? Or maybe
I'm gonna
the,
give you
the
the
latest one that you just explored?
it's one of those, as a designer, I can't believe I haven't said yet, it depends, right? It really depends on who you're playing with, how many people, what the mood is. There's so many board games that I like, from party games, from to heavy strategy games. So really, I'm happy to play any sort of board game.
Nice. Yeah, in the video games, probably it's the same answer. It depends.
Exactly.
But maybe you can share your favorite place in your hometown or around your hometown for us to imagine, your surroundings.
Yeah, so I'm in Toronto. I live in Midtown, which is sort of like a nice balance between urban and parks. So always love to. We live within a walking distance of a really nice ravine where we almost every weekend we go for a walk there, and it's just beautiful. It just lets you disconnect from the city and just be in nature.
Nice. I will check. I mean, Slovenia is the same. Yeah? I like to
Yeah.
disconnect in nature, so to get some green color in my eyes. Yeah, I really enjoy talking with you, and I encourage you, like I said, to do more episodes of your podcast. I will also link it into my show notes, and now you can also hear my dog bark. Probably he wants to go out. So thanks so much for your time, Guy. And yeah, continue rocking on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.